All right. Hello, everybody. It is 3 o'clock where I'm at, 6 o'clock on the East Coast. It is time once again, as we do every Thursday, to talk about pitching. Welcome to Taking Your Pitch to the Next Level. My name is Carlo Gonzalez-MOSS. I am the CEO of Moranti Media. We are a startup company that's focused entirely around the world of pitching. Whether it comes to pitch decks, pitch coaching, that's our world, and that's what we live in. And I'm here to teach you how to take your pitch to the next level. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is week 4. Last week we talked about some of the stuff that sucks about the pitching process, receiving notes, and when to make adjustments. We're going to review that, and then we'll dig into today's topic, which is rejection and why you're getting rejected. But before that, I want to remind you at Moranti Media, we are constantly working around the world of the pitch. If you have a pitch coming up and you need coaching, we do that. We do pitch coaching. If you need a pitch deck built, that's what we do. You can check us out at moranti.com. If you have any questions that pop up throughout the course of this class, or if you want to know more about pitching, you can always reach out to me. Every form of social media, it's at Carlo Moss, or you can reach out to me direct. Just email on the contact form at moranti.com. Scroll down the bottom of the website and shoot me an email there. If you go to moranti.com, you can see all of our services, pricing, all that good stuff, as well as a look at our portfolio. So all that in mind, let's talk a little bit about what we went over last week. Let's do some review about some of the stuff that sucks about pitching. I let you guys in a little bit to my world. As I've mentioned a couple of times, I'm in the middle of pitching a bunch of stuff right now. I'm probably doing more pitching than I have in the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm in the middle of experiencing a lot of this stuff. One of the projects that I took out that I was really excited about 2 weeks ago, we found out that everybody passed, and that happens. And so that's why I wanted to specifically address this aspect of the pitching process, which is quite literally one of the essential parts, is how to deal with rejection, how to deal with notes, how to deal with the stuff that kind of sucks. So reviewing last week, we talked about, first of all, receiving notes. First, you identify who's giving you notes. It might be your reps, your partners, which would be producers, studios that you're working with, people that you have a shopping agreement with, friends and colleagues, a pitch consultant like myself, or most importantly, an interested buyer who's giving you notes on the condition that if you change this, we'll buy your show. We then dug into the idea of how to receive notes and how that is in and of itself a skill set. Some of the key points that I touched on. Number one, you don't have to respond. You don't have to sit there and start playing solution whack-a-mole where you're going, is this the fix? Is this the solution? Perhaps this, maybe also this. Another important thing that we talked about is the idea that notes aren't gospel. Just because you get a note doesn't mean that you have to change it. We also talked about, like, one of my personal pet peeves: don't take your notes calls either outside or in a car. Get to a place where you can actually write down the notes, where you can be engaged and you can listen to everything that's coming at you, because otherwise you're doing a disservice to everybody involved. We also talked about a key point, which is don't get defensive. Don't start arguing about why the thing you said is right or why the note is wrong. Just listen, go, okay, great. Yeah, we'll take a look at that, and be on your way. Also talked about looking for the notes behind the notes. You might not agree with every note that you get, and something might feel like it's kind of out of left field. But if you dig in, you might be able to identify, there's actually something deeper that this exec is bumping on, and it's exemplified in this note that they gave. Also, feel free to yes and when you're getting notes. It's a little bit different from that solution whack-a-mole, right? The solution whack-a-mole is, we have a problem with this. Will this fix it? Whereas if you're yes-anding, you're speaking from a place of, that makes me think of this. Or, that's a great idea. We can totally do that. And that would then take care of this, and this problem. It's collaborative as opposed to like a teacher-student kind of relationship of like, did I do this right? Can I have validation, please? All right. And then our final point on how to receive notes was, don't bullshit. Just take the notes, be genuine. It goes back to the point that I make time and time again of, be a real human being, be a real person. If something isn't working, don't try to bullshit as to why you have an excuse for it. Just sit there and take the note and go, yeah, we can take a look at that. We can fix that. Then we dug into the idea of when to make adjustments and when not to. There's really a time and a place for every type of adjustment in the pitch process, and that we have to treat our pitches as if they're living, breathing things. It's something that's going to be constantly changing and evolving based on both your own process as you build the pitch and you have interactions with it. You talk about it over and over again. And it's also going to be based on feedback that you get because you're going to be going out to all these different people that you're getting notes from. We never want to view the pitch as a finished product. We also talked about the idea that not all adjustments are created equal. There's a time and a place for each type of adjustment. When you're at the early stages of your pitch, you're really building the scaffolding of your construction project, right? I used the example last week that when I go in, I warn my partners that I have really fat first drafts. I'm going to come in with the first draft of a pitch. It might be like 35 to 40 minutes, and that's going to freak you out if you never work with me, but that's part of my process. So don't worry. I want to hear the thing on its feet and figure out what's working. Then from there, you build out the meat of your content. You really solidify what you're talking about. That, those middle moments when you're probably like a month or two out from the pitch, that's really when you're building like the heart of the thing. And when you're getting close, when you got those meetings scheduled and you're a few weeks out, then that's the time for the nitty gritty. When you start getting in there with a real fine tooth comb and you start going over every little bit of how you say something. Could I condense this? Are we being redundant here? That's where you really, really get particular and really focus on making the pitch the absolute best possible thing that it can be. And then once you get to the week or the day of your pitch, it's time to throw away that fine tooth comb. The work with the nitty gritty is done. You need to trust that you have done the work. The most important thing at this point, as you're on the verge of your pitch, is that you go into it with the utmost confidence. That's what I care about. I care about that you are walking into this pitch feeling like $1 million. And then the final time to make adjustments is when you need to make those adjustments midstream in your pitch tree. Maybe you've gone out to a few different places and you've gotten some substantive feedback off of passes. That's when you go, all right, clearly this isn't working. We need to adjust midstream. When you're getting repeated pieces of feedback about something that clearly is not hitting on your pitch. So all of that to say, that was last week. That is how you deal with notes, and that's how you deal with adjustments. So today, we're going to be talking about rejection. If notes and adjustments are the thing that kind of suck about the pitch, rejection is the thing that really, really sucks about the pitch. When you go in, you put your heart and soul into something, and then it kind of fails, and you get no's, which again, something that I'm dealing with right now, which really sucks. But before I dig into that, I want to remind you all that you can be a part of this class. If you have comments, if you have questions, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or somewhere else, go ahead and leave me a comment. I am keeping an eye on our comments throughout the entire show. So if you have a question, if you want a clarification on something, or you just have a comment that you want to share, join in the conversation. I want, as I always say, I want this to be a two-way street. I want to be able to interact with y'all. And also, if you are watching this on delay or on demand, go ahead and leave a comment or a question in the Facebook or YouTube comment section, because before every class, I go through, make sure that, check and see if there's any comments or questions that have been left throughout the week, and we dig into those and explore those. So again, want this to be a conversation, but let's jump into our topic today, rejection and why you're getting rejected. So I think that we've all heard some version of the talk about our industry, about how hard it is, about how rejection kind of comes with the entry fee, that we work in an industry that is defined by rejection, and we're all going to experience it at one point or another. That being said, it doesn't make the blow any easier when it actually happens, because you can know it in your head. You can know oh yeah, I know I chose a hard industry, but once it starts kind of punching you right in the mouth, that's when you really start to feel it. So let's talk about this idea of rejection, how we can deal with it, how we can mitigate against it, and ultimately how we can use it to become better at pitching and to ultimately sell another show later down the road. So the first thing I want you to think about is, before your pitch even starts, before you even go in there, go in with managed expectations. We talked about this idea 2 weeks ago, but we're going to dig into it deeper today. Managed expectations. Know that the odds are against you, okay? You are walking into a room, and the person on the other end of that room has that bag of gold coins. They got like 7 gold coins they get to use through the whole year and change somebody's life. It's going to be pretty tough to get them to give you one of those gold coins, and you're not a failure if you're not able to procure one of those, right? The odds are against you, but you can improve the odds if you're taking multiple swings, if you're going in and pitching and creating lots and lots of shows and just being a working artist, whether you're getting paid for it yet or not. I'd want you to view every pitch as an opportunity to get better. At the very least, that should be the takeaway is, was that pitch better than the last one? Was this show that I'm pitching now, was that set up better than the last show that I took out? You should be setting your goals and expectations reasonably and with an eye on the things that are within your control. If the number one thing that I preach is rehearse, 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 the number 2 thing that I preach is just focus on what you can control. Leave everything else to everybody else, all right? Keep an eye on the things within your control. If you go in and your goal is simply like, I want to sell a TV show, and if I don't, I fail. Well, there are a lot of things outside of your control that could potentially keep that from happening. So, think about this. You might end up putting together a killer pitch that couldn't have been any better. Like you absolutely maxed out your potential 100%. Walked in there, killed it. Every exec in every room that you stepped into was really impressed. You built your relationship with them. You now have a stronger reputation with them, and they hold you in a high regard. But you walk away from the process feeling like a failure because you ultimately didn't succeed at your stated goal. You didn't sell the show. Could have been for any number of reasons. Maybe it was a fit issue. Maybe they're just not buying that much right now. It could have been anything. Or it could also be, something within the pitch that wasn't working with them. Let's assume, though, you killed it. You did the best possible job. If you went in with that goal of, I'm going to sell a show or bust, then you're going to leave disappointed and you're going to beat yourself up. It's like a baseball player going into a game saying, you know what? My goal tonight is to hit a 3-run home run. Okay, cool. It's good to have goals, but you achieving that goal is tied to a bunch of different circumstances outside of your control. Like that baseball player, in order to achieve his goal of hitting a 3-run homer, is going to need to have at least 2 runners on base at some point. That might not ever happen, and that has nothing to do with him. So if he's sitting there and his success or failure is based on those outside circumstances, he's already setting himself up to fail. If instead you're focusing your goals on the things that you can control, like your presentation, the way that you're conveying your idea, the actual meat and the content in your pitch, and the way that you respond to the executive's questions, you're in complete control of whether or not you feel like a success. And we need to recognize this is always a long shot when we go into pitch. Every pitch is a 3-pointer, to mix my metaphors. Execs at networks hear hundreds of pitches every year and end up moving forward on just a handful of them. You're not going to be one of those handfuls every time. You're going to face rejection. It's going to hurt. Just getting in the room is a victory in and of itself. I mean, think about how many people would be impressed if you told them, like, oh, yeah, yesterday I had a pitch at Netflix, right? Your cousin from the middle of the country who has no experience in the entertainment industry is going to think, oh, my God, that's amazing. That would be like a dream come true. That kid in college thinking about, dreaming of becoming a screenwriter, they heard that. If you told them like, oh yeah, you're going to pitch Netflix, they would lose their absolute shit to get that opportunity. So recognize that just getting in the room that you're in is a victory. You have already made it past 99% of most of the people in this town, in this industry, who are hoping to pitch. So you're already ahead of the curve. You're stacking up victories on victories. And just because it ultimately didn't end in that one thing does not mean it's a complete failure. It may take a while chopping down that tree before you finally knock it down. And you don't know which swing is the one that's going to knock it down. But over time, if you continue to put the work in, you're going to find yourself getting better and better and better. And you're going to find yourself ending up in those rooms much more frequently. I remember when I was pitching and failing just over and over again, I was like 6 or 7 years ago. I was really befuddled. Like I would walk out of a pitch and be like, I fucking killed that one, nailed it. They're for sure gonna buy it, and I thought I was so good. And then I would come back and they would pass. And I got to this point where I felt like there was like this secret code that I couldn't crack and I couldn't figure it out. But honestly, now I look back at those pitches and I kind of cringe. They could have been a lot better. If me now, as having been an executive, if I was sitting on the other end of that table, I would have passed on those too. A bunch of them had some fundamental flaws running through the middle of them. I know for a fact that I wouldn't have greenlit most of those projects. And so like looking back, there was a lot of room to grow, except that you are not a finished product, just like your pitch. So that's going into the pitch. You manage your expectations. That's a huge part of being great at pitching. Now, while you're waiting to hear back, you've gone in, you pitched your show. While you're waiting to hear back, there's a few things I want you to focus on. Number one, going back to that point, did you handle everything in your control? Everything that you could have taken care of, did you do it? Did you walk into that pitch with the feeling of the kid who did their homework, who studied for the test? Because if you did, congratulations. You focused on everything in your control. Focus more on what you did in the room than on what everybody else did. Don't be the person sitting there being like, ooh, that joke didn't get quite the laugh that I wanted. Clearly, there's something wrong with it. Let me go in and tinker. No. Focus on what you did. Don't focus on the fact that one of the execs was looking over there at their cat that you can't see off camera for half the time. Who knows what was happening? There are certain networks, for example, where you're just not going to get laughs no matter what. So don't try to read too much into one person's question or one person's joke or one person's face, especially when it comes to making adjustments to your pitch. Do not become a prisoner of the moment. Recognize the things that are in your control, identify those, and go, did I execute on those? If the answer is yes, give yourself a pat on the back, sit in your own confidence, and walk into your next pitch with that confidence, knowing that you 100% did everything you could. The other thing, while you're waiting to hear news back, right? You're sitting there, God, I just want to hear if they're picking up my show or not. It's nerve-wracking. It can take weeks. Do not panic over no news. There are a million different reasons why you're not hearing back. And I know, as a creator, having worked with lots of creators, we sit there and we use our creativity in the worst ways. We imagine all the different reasons why we're not hearing back. Is it a good sign? Is it a bad sign? Is it a medium sign? There are a million different reasons why you haven't heard back yet. Like you could be sitting there for a week, 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks. There are no hard and fast rules as to how long it takes to hear back. I've had creators that I work with that obsess over things like, oh my God, it's been a week. Do you think that that's a good sign or do you think it's a bad sign? I always tell them, I don't fucking know. Could be good, could be bad. No way to tell. For all you know, maybe someone's kid's been sick for a week and that's why you haven't heard anything back. Or somebody's boss is on vacation, so they can't greenlight anything until he's back. There is literally no way for you to tell. When you hear, you'll hear. And if you spend that time obsessing over every possible permutation of what could be happening, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And you're going to create a bunch of anxiety that you don't need. Focus on something else and trust that the news will come when it comes. If you haven't heard anything after like 2 weeks, go ahead. You can poke your rep. Ask them if they've heard anything. Chances are they have already done that over at the network. My rule of thumb is basically this. When I check in, if a full week has passed since the week of our pitch, then I'll ask to see if there's any updates or anything. And when I say a full week, let's say we pitched on Wednesday, week goes by, then the next Friday is when I'll ask. Again, no hard and fast rules, but the last thing I want to do is like get my reps pissed off at me or get them annoyed, or worse, get the network annoyed. But you shouldn't be contacting the network anyways. That's your rep's job. Another thing I want you to think about while you're waiting, do not overread every interaction or lack thereof. It's easy for us, again, using our great creative brains for bad, where we sit there and we overthink, read too much into every interaction that we had of, oh, they said they want to have a call. That's got to be a good sign. Oh, no, they want to have the call on the phone, not the Zoom. That is clearly bad. Clearly, there's no way that that can be good news. You don't get to know. Just wait. There are no hard and fast rules. I remember I was working with a creator once who was convinced that, oh, you always hear news after a Tuesday because that's when all the networks have their big networks in the studios have their big all hands meeting and they discuss all the projects, and so we won't hear back until after a Tuesday. I'm like, that's not a thing. Sometimes you have meetings where you share all of your projects that you have coming in. Sometimes it's a monthly thing. Sometimes, you don't get to know. That's the thing that you have to take away from this. You don't get to know. You just have to wait. And that sucks. So now, speaking of things that suck, you got rejected. You went to a network. You had hopes and dreams in your eyes that this was going to be the thing that changed your life. And they said, no, thank you. We don't want to make your TV show. That fucking blows. Accept that. Understand and honor the idea that rejection is a traumatic experience. You probably put some amount of yourself into this project and somebody said they don't want it. That's tough to deal with. All right. Rejection is a traumatic experience, especially if it's repeated over and over again. And if you spend enough time in this business, you are going to have rejection repeated over and over again. It's one of the things that I always like to say. Me and my wife repeat it back to each other of, it's not about getting scared. It's okay to be scared is what you do with the scared. It's okay to be nervous. It's what you do with the nervous. It's okay to get rejected. It's what you do with the rejection. You have to allow yourself to feel your feelings. This sucks. There's no wrong answer when it comes to how you're feeling. And especially in those first, hours and days dealing with the rejection, feel however you're going to feel. Validate those feelings. However you're feeling, that's the right answer. Be honest. Be upfront with yourself. Be bummed. It's okay. This sucks. You probably worked really hard towards something and it didn't come to fruition. Hell, this may be the end of the line for something that you've had in your life for months and years. That's the type of thing that you need to grieve. All right? It's natural to be disappointed. Allow yourself to feel that disappointment if that's what comes up and process those feelings. As much as I sit here and I preach a lot of positivity and focusing on what you can control, it's also just as important to honor your natural feelings. To go, man, I really thought we had that. That makes me really sad. This fucking sucks. Honor those feelings. Just don't get stuck there. Don't let that rejection stop you from making another thing. Don't let that rejection make you feel like you are unworthy or like you don't deserve to have your TV show on the air. That this life is for somebody else. If you get stuck there, then the rejection wins. Okay. Also realize that there's no right answer to how you're supposed to feel. You might feel fine. You might get rejected and be like, oh, thank God. Oh, good. I didn't want to make that show after all. I remember, allow your feelings to surprise you if they need to. I've had projects, the most recent project where I got a pass. I remember the first pass that we got. I tend to pride myself on being, fairly positive in things, but the first pass that we got, I got a lot more bummed out than I thought I would. And I remember it came on a Friday night a few weeks ago. And my wife and I went to the gym, and I just told her, I was like, why is this hitting me so hard? And, she told me, she was like, because it sucks. Because you thought that you had it, and they passed on it. Like, it's okay to be bummed. And she helped me really validate that, process that, and work through it. And then the next day, I felt better. Felt a little bit better. And then the next day, I felt a little bit better after that. I've also had projects where, I put everything into it. I feel really good about it. And then once the final no comes through and everyone said no, there's kind of a sense of relief. I don't have to sit on pins and needles anymore, but also oh, okay, I got a definitive answer. They told me what they feel, and so I don't have to wonder anymore if this is going to be a thing or not. It's not. And so there was a sense of relief and joy, and that's okay too. That's one of the things that I learned when it comes to grief or when it comes to trauma, which this is, however you feel is valid. And so accept those feelings as valid. Get in touch with yourself and be honest with yourself. Feel your feelings, because that's how you get to the next thing. Big thing that you want to do here. You've gotten rejected. They passed on your show. Identify the difference between you failing and a fit issue. What happened? Sometimes you have a great pitch and it's just not right for the network. On my last round of pitches, I went into this one network and honestly had one of the best pitches of my life. I was on fire. I nailed it, and I felt more confident than I have in a while coming out of a pitch. This was going to sell. And then I found out they passed. Like 2 weeks later, get a call from my rep, and they passed. And I was so confused. It seemed like it was a slam dunk, and they totally loved it. Come to find out, they did totally love it. But the show that I was pitching just wasn't in line with where they were at with their network. In fact, they'd only taken the pitch because the idea sounded really cool, and they're like, oh, we got to hear this. Pure curiosity. They never had any intention on buying it, but they had to hear it. It just sounded so fun that they had to take the pitch meeting, but they knew there was no chance they were going to be able to pull the trigger on it. Then they come to find out, and what was great was they gave some honest feedback to my reps and production partners that was then relayed to me. They went back and had an actual serious conversation about it. They went in and going like, oh, this will be a fun idea to hear. We can't pick it up, but whatever. They went back and said, all right, guys, that was better than we could have ever imagined. Is this something that our network could be? And they had that full-on conversation. I nearly turned a no into a yes, which is one of the most impossible things to do in our industry. So how on earth could I view that as anything other than a win? Am I going to beat myself up and act like I failed when I handled everything in my control and facilitated that serious conversation at that network that they might need to pick up a show that they had no intention of picking up? That's a friggin' win. And I need to celebrate that and focus on the fact that everything in my control went exceptionally well. Not sit there and beat myself up because the thing didn't sell. Remember, not everything is in your control. We'll talk more later today about reasons why your pitch might not be selling. And a lot of those things are things that are not in your control. Don't blame others. Don't act like everyone is dumber than you. Take accountability, but don't obsess over the things you can't control. Blaming others is an easy way to ignore the nagging feeling that you didn't give all you could have. Well, I've pitched with people in the past who, anytime that there's a pass, instead of looking at what they could have done better, they immediately resort to everyone in this industry is an idiot. Everything on TV sucks. Why won't they pick up my genius ideas? I'm better than everybody. Blah, 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 blah. Those people suck to work with. And ultimately, that's one of the reasons why they're not selling shows, because they believe that they're smarter than everyone and there's nothing for them to learn. A rejection is an opportunity for you to be able to get better, to learn more about yourself. And if you shirk that accountability strictly on the account of I'm smarter than everybody, you're blowing by an absolutely golden opportunity to get better. The other thing, don't start pointing fingers at your different partners, whether it's your production partners, your writing partners, the people that pitched with you. Once it's done, let it be done. Don't sit there going like, if you had done this better, we would have sold the show. Or if you had listened to me here, we would have sold the show. It's over. Let it go. Also understand that the market doesn't lie. This is a business. You took your product out onto the open market and there wasn't a demand for it. That's the fact. Good products come onto the market all the time and don't succeed. New Coke consistently was preferred over Coca-Cola Classic in taste tests. But when it was put into the market chose Coke Classic. You can tell me over and over again that New Coke was the superior product. You can tell me over and over again all the ways why you think that it was better. And intellectually, you might be right, but the market's opinion was ultimately the one that mattered. And so no matter how good you think your product, your show is, if it doesn't sell, there's not a market for it. The market just gave you its answer. Learn how to accept that. I thought this show was great. Maybe it still is great, but there's not a market for it right now. Maybe it'll be the right fit in a few years. Who knows? when the market gives you an answer, learn to listen. Getting back on the horse. What are the other projects that you're working on? Because you can't sit in this forever. I mean, you can, but it's not going to do you any good, right? How do you get back on the horse? Ask yourself, you should be working on other projects. You should be developing other ideas. Don't put all of your eggs into one basket, because ultimately you don't get to choose the thing that goes for you. I mean, I know for a fact, if I got to choose the thing that jump-started my career, I would not have chosen pooping Barbies, right? Your job is to just keep making stuff and get better at your craft to the point that you're undeniable. You don't get to pick, I want this show to be the one that makes my career. Sorry, it's not the way it works. You just go keep making stuff and get better at what you do. Follow what you know you're supposed to do. If you were pinning all of your hopes on one project to be the salvation of us all and it doesn't go, holy shit, that's a world-crushing experience. You set yourself up to get crushed and absolutely have your world shattered. But if it's one of, a few different spinning plates that you have, all right, cool, on to the next one. If one of the 5 different ideas you have in various stages of development doesn't go, all right, that's fine. You need to diversify your creative portfolio so that you're putting yourself in a position where you can stay in the game. Because if you're sitting there and you've got everything on this one project and you're all in, if it goes bust, that's like your career right there. You don't have anything else. But if you got a few chips here, a few chips there, then congratulations, you keep going. And so much of this industry is just staying. It's just getting through the tough parts to get to the point where your luck turns around. There's a great, one of my favorite new shows is Winning Time. There's a great quote that Jerry Buss has in there where he's talking about Monopoly and he's talking about luck and he's talking about the fact of part of the game of Monopoly is just staying in it. And that is so true of our industry. So much of it is just staying in it, continuing to make stuff, continuing to stay there until you hit that point where your luck turns around. Because you don't get to choose when your luck turns around and when you happen to have the perfect idea at the perfect time, at the perfect network, and everything comes together and all of a sudden you're making your dream show. If we got to choose when our dreams came true, we'd all be billionaires at 21, and then we'd have a bunch of 21-year-old billionaires, and the world would be the fucking worst. So, next thing, don't drive yourself crazy over things you can't control or can never know. Oh my God, that's a really long Chiron. After a rejection, it's real easy to start playing Monday morning quarterback. If I just done this, or if we'd focused on this character more, then maybe they would have bought it. Yeah, maybe. There's no way to know. But guess what? You're never going to know the answer. Let it go. Maybe if we did this. I don't know. Maybe that would have worked. I remember I was pitching with someone once who was so convinced. He had this theory that execs were never giving him the actual reason for why they passed on a project. I'm not really sure what the reasoning was behind that, but he had this idea that they couldn't really say why they passed, so they always just made up some kind of bullshit that sounded valid and sounded like a thing. And so he would then tie himself in knots trying to figure out what the real reason was, right? His brain needed something to occupy itself, and his brain wouldn't take the answer of just wasn't a good fit here, or it was this one thing. No, it's this other thing. It's this secret thing. And I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna activate my brain until I can figure it out. But guess what? You can never figure it out. And so he would tie himself in knots trying to figure out what the real reason was. And meanwhile, now I can look back on that experience, having been an exec, and go, yeah, that doesn't usually happen. If I'm telling you why I didn't go for a show, that's why I didn't go for it. Even if it sounds like something minor to you, it might be something really important to the overall fabric of our slate of shows at the studio or network where I'm working. I remember when I was an exec, I always made a point of doing my best to give some substantive feedback that showed a real reason why the pitch missed. And not every exec does that, but you have so many better things to do than spending time trying to figure out which execs are bullshitting you and which are not. There are so many better activities. Focus on those. Go do anything else. Leave the kind of ruminating on which execs are full of shit to somebody else. Big question here. Did you get substantive feedback on the pitch that was passed on? This is one of the biggest differences between good pitchers and great pitchers. If you got really good substantive feedback of we passed on this because of X, Y, and Z, or this thing did not work, that's awesome. Now go act on it. Identify where your pitch came up short and make sure that that doesn't happen on the next one. You just got a free cheat code. Use it. Another question to ask yourself is, did you establish a relationship or further a relationship at the places you pitched? At the very least, you should have made a positive impression on everyone that got to see your pitch. That's a thing that you can control. Did everyone walk away from that impressed with your work, impressed with you as a creator, and drawn toward working with you at some point? One thing that you can do to continue like furthering these relationships, if you're not good at names, make a spreadsheet of everyone you pitched, because it's really useful for your reps and your future partners if you tell them like, oh yeah, I pitched so-and-so before. She's a big fan of my work. When people get to know you and you start establishing these strong relationships with your work and your personality, they want to buy from you more. They also keep you in mind when new projects come up, when they move to different companies, and when they need to connect people. It's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. So much of our business is built on the backs of relationships. Because if I've worked with someone before, or they've come in and pitched me and they killed, and they've done that repeatedly, I know that they're going to be good if I bring them into another project. Work toward getting an open door policy at a network. At most of the networks and streamers at this point, I've established a relationship with the execs over years. And so anytime I have a new project, I know that they want to hear from me. That provides a clear roadmap when you're creating projects. You're sitting there and you've got a new idea and you're writing it, and you're like, oh, where this would be a good fit? This network and this network and this network. I'll make sure I tell my rep when I send them over the first draft. And it also makes you much more attractive anytime you're hiring new reps. I mean, personally, I'm in the process of looking at new agents, and it's definitely a feather in my cap to be able to tell them like, oh yeah, I have a relationship with this network. Oh, this exec loves me, da, 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 da. So that's a huge thing to make sure that you do. And then off of that, if it's appropriate, send a thank you. I had this happen at a studio a couple of weeks ago where I pitched something. I have a really good relationship with the exec. We go way back. And so I made a point of like, they passed, but we had fun in the pitch, and they seemed to respond really strongly to it. So I emailed them afterwards. I was like, hey man, just wanted to like take a minute. Really appreciate you taking the time. I love pitching you, and I had the time of my life. I know we're not going to move forward on it, but we're going to find the right one to ultimately work together on at some point. And that's building a relationship. I mean, it goes back to our lesson of just being a genuine person, right? So if somebody takes time out of their day to listen to the thing that I came up with, I'm going to say thank you. That's a human thing. Be a good person, right? It recognizes that people's time is valuable and that you appreciate it. Again, only if appropriate, and be genuine about it. I only do this if I have a strong existing relationship with that individual exec. I want to make sure I'm coming across as 100% real and genuine. So those are all of the things that you need to know about rejection, how to handle it, what to do beforehand, what to do while you're waiting. And ultimately, if that situation happens, and it will happen if you're pitching with any regularity, how you handle it. So now we're going to talk about, what might be causing the rejection, why your pitch isn't selling. These are some of the hard conversations I have to have with myself when I go out, when I take a project out and it doesn't work. So the first thing that I need you to know, this by no means is an exhaustive list. There are an infinite number of reasons why your pitch isn't selling. They're specific to you and your pitch. But having been an executive and having been a creator, having sat on both sides of the table, these are some of the reasons why it might not be selling. Your comedy isn't funny, your drama isn't dramatic, or your horror isn't scary. If your show isn't doing the main thing that it's supposed to be doing, that's an instant pass. For example, in comedy, if you're spending most of your pitch explaining to me why something is going to be funny, instead of saying things from your show that cause me to actually laugh, it's not funny. All right. So recognize that your show needs to do the thing that you are proposing that it will do, right? Do you have some big twist at the end and it's not that big of a twist? It's just that the main character ate a sandwich once. Well, then you're not really doing the thing your show is supposed to do. Are you pitching a crazy horror show that's going to have people on the edge of their seats? And in actuality, it's just like, oh, I'm not scared at all. In fact, I'm kind of bored. Well, yeah, that's going to be one of the reasons why pitch isn't selling. Focus on what genre you're living in. And ultimately, if there's supposed to be some type of reaction, if you're not getting that in the room, then that's a clear indication that something is missing. I came up through comedy, so my brain always goes to that. And when I see pitches that aren't selling, or if I get pitched something that's supposed to be funny and I'm not laughing, there's no way I'm buying that. Another reason why your pitch might not be selling, you're not pitching the show that you're selling. You know, let's dig into that idea because it's a little bit of a wordy kind of thought. But you have to go in, and if you propose a show, you then need to sell that show, not something else. You have a limited amount of time. You got those 18 to 20 minutes. And if you want to spend them talking about something else than the show that you are specifically selling, you're not going to sell that show. You might be talking too much about your own personal story or background. I like to go back to this example because my first big pitch was Most Popular Girls in School right there. It was my YouTube series way back in the day. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. But we took it out, and our first pitch, we thought that we were so great. And we had this awesome YouTube channel that had all these views, had all these subscribers, and we were pitching a TV version of it. And ultimately, the pitch ended up being us talking about how we started the YouTube channel, where the idea came from, what a great story it was, grassroots, pulled ourselves up from our bootstraps, and weren't we so impressive and wonderful and great? We didn't spend damn near any time talking about the characters, talking about the relationships between those characters, talking about what episodes of the TV show would look like. We didn't dig into themes. We didn't dig into the format. We didn't talk at all about the show we were selling. We were talking about the show that we'd already made. And that's why that show didn't sell. I mean, there might have been other reasons too, but that, like, number one, boom, instant pass. Like, you're pitching me a show that that's not what we're talking about here. Another thing that might cause your pitch to not be about the show you're selling is you're spending too much time on backstory. You've created this elaborate world, and you want to make sure that the person on the other end of the table, demonstration of competence. Remember, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. You want to make sure that that person on the other end of the table knows just how brilliant you are and how expansive this world is. And you spent so much time building it out. So you're going to spend the majority of your time making sure that they understand the ins and outs and nitty gritty of this world, and not as much time on the actual show that you're selling. You come in with an intriguing premise, but you spend more time focused on something else. That would always be like the most disappointing thing to do when I was an exec, where you come in, you start talking about this idea that you got, and then you veer off into another direction that has nothing to do with the actual show. Recognize, is this something going to be the difference between them saying no or yes? And if it's not, get it the hell out of your pitch. Another reason why you might not be selling your show, you didn't execute the idea or deliver on the promise of the premise. Like I said, there's been so many times when I hear a great idea and then it ends up not being what the show's about. You spend too much time on every other thing, or you come in with an idea and you don't execute it. You don't do the thing that you were supposed to do. Your show is not about the specific thing that you said it is about. It's about something completely different. And so that tells me you don't know your own voice, and you don't know what your show's about or what it should be about. You also might not be activating the executive's imagination. That's one of the things we hammer over and over again. The best sign in a pitch is when that exec is sitting there starting to pitch you ideas about episodes. When they can see it in their head of like, oh, okay, I understand this character. It'd be really funny if she got into this situation. Or I could see him getting into this with this character over here. And, oh, they're going to get stuck in this situation, and that's going to be trouble, right? When they start pitching you, that means their imagination is activated. And so if you're not doing that, they can't see your show on TV. They can't see your show on their network. They can't see what it looks like. And if that's the case, it's not going to be put on their network. Some things that might be missing that are causing you to have this problem might be really good, clear episode samples that give you a sense of what the show's about and what it's going to look like on a week-to-week basis. Might be missing clear examples of what happens in the show. You might have spent just too much time talking about the abstract or your intentions, like what you want the show to be, what the themes you want to explore, without giving me some tangible examples of what actually happens in the show, of like, how do conversations happen? Do we have diner scenes like in Seinfeld? They're walking, like, what does the actual show look like? And if you don't give me those tangible examples, I don't have much to go on as an exec. If we stay in the abstract and the theoretical and talk all themes, you might sound smart, but you're not going to sell the show. Now, ask yourself, when you can't activate the executive's imagination, is it a problem with the show itself or in the way that you pitched it? Okay, I think there's a big difference there. Is there something fundamentally flawed with the show where you're not able to convey it to an exec that you need to change so that it actually can be executable? Or is there something wrong with the way that you pitched it, where the way you positioned it, you just couldn't get into that executive's imagination? Another big reason, they're not connecting with your characters. You might get a pass just because the characters don't have a level of relatability that we need. That could be based on any number of things. They might be too specific to your own experience. The dialogue that you're presenting, either in the pitch or in a pitch deck or something, or in some kind of example, doesn't feel like a real person. They might be too broad. They might be too narrow. Ultimately, there's a lack of relatability there. Perhaps in your pitch, there's just not enough focus on relationships and personality. If you took my first class, we talked a lot in our character section when we're writing character descriptions, both in our pitch decks and our verbal pitches. The focus is for characters want to be on their personality and their relationships. What are they like in here, and how do they relate to the world around them? When they deal with somebody, how does the rest of the world feel about them? And a lot of times we get stuck on backstory, we get stuck on looks. Those are not the things that cause you to connect with the character. We want to be able to fully latch on to something about that character, whether we like them, hate them, or feel a very specific way. And if they're not connecting with your characters, they're not going to buy your show. Another big reason why your show isn't selling is because it doesn't fit. And most times, that's something you can't control. And if you try to control it, oh, that's the worst. If someone passes on your show because it's just not right for a network, we're looking for this right now, and then you try to shoehorn your show into that, oh my God, I can't think of an example where that's worked and where it just hasn't been cringy. There's a couple of reasons, a couple of different types of it doesn't fit examples. First might be the network identity. If you try to pitch a raunchy TVMA comedy to CBS, guess what? It's not going to sell, no matter how good it is. It could be the best, super raunchy, comedy, animated TVMA, nudity everywhere. But guess what? CBS can't buy that, right? So the network's identity is really important, and that means that it's also really important for you to do your research, do your homework, understand what the identities are for different networks. And don't try to convince networks that it should be something different, right? In your head, maybe this is the perfect fit for a new direction at Bravo. Well, guess what? You can't force Bravo to go in a new direction. You can't force, your brilliant idea might sound brilliant to you, but won't work for a number of reasons because you're a creator, not an executive. So it just might not be the right fit because the network has a different identity. I'd be able to understand what those identities are so that you're pitching to the right networks, okay? It also might not fit their current mandate. Network mandates change all the time. What you're selling might just not be what they're buying right now. Your agent, your manager should be keeping up on what the networks are each looking for right now, because it can vary wildly and it can change at any time, depending on who's on executive turnover, on what's really successful right now. You don't know. And so lean on your reps to be on top of those network mandates. In thinking about network mandates, one of the big influences is, did a network just have a big hit with one type of show? 6 months later, everyone is going to be trying to buy their version of that right now. For example, at this moment, everyone wants their version of Euphoria, right? That's the big hit that everybody is chasing, and they want their version of it. So that's, you're going to get a lot of mandates like that. So be able to identify like, oh, our show is like, it just doesn't fit what the network's looking for right now. And ultimately you go, all right, well, that's something out of my control. I can't change that. It is what it is. Another thing that might cause a fit issue, executive turnover. For example, it's going to be real tough to pitch Netflix right now, given all of their layoffs. I know that there are some networks where the execs just don't really respond to my brand of comedy. If that exec is in power at a particular network, it's probably not worth me pitching them because they don't think I'm funny. I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay. In fact, that makes me more appealing to the people who do get my work. I've got a specificity to my voice and my point of view. I want to work with the people who get me, not the people who don't want to work with me. That's okay. Another easy reason why you might not be selling your show is budget issues. If I know, as an exec, if I know there's no way that my network, my studio is going to be able to make this the way that it's pitched, then of course I can't move on it. And that's something that you might be able to change, but probably not. I remember when I was an animation exec, a lot of times creators would come in with a very specific vision of an animation style that they wanted. But if they came from a writing perspective and not an animation background, they won't realize, doing your show like that is going to cost quadruple what a typical animated comedy costs. There are reasons for this. There are budget issues, and I'm not going to be able to sign off on a show that needs to be that expensive to work, right? You're pitching me a show and it's like, has to be this animation style. Well, if it has to be that animation style, I don't have the money to make that animation style, so it's going to be a pass. And this can also come down to timing a lot of times. You might go into a network and they just happen to have greenlit a bunch of shows. They might have just picked up a bunch of stuff. So they're going to have a tighter budget and are not going to be able to buy as much as they would have 6 weeks ago. Also, did they just have like a really high price show bomb? They might not be able to spend as much money on shows anymore. It might even come down to like, are you pitching in November right before the end of the year, or are you pitching right before the end of a company's fiscal year? Their budgets are going to be a lot smaller at that point in the year than they are right at the beginning of the year. So if they pass on it, it might just be like a timing and budget issue. Another reason why your show might not be selling, you might be going after an oversaturated market. When I was an animation exec, I got to the point where superheroes were pretty much going to get passed no matter what. I got so many damn superhero pitches that it became pretty near impossible for a creator to come in and say something original with a superhero pitch. So I'd be like, yeah, it sounds interesting, but this is already an oversaturated market. Of course, this is a double-edged sword because I just got done talking about how everybody wants their euphoria right now, right? So it's this little balancing act because we do live in a total copycat industry. Everyone's looking for their euphoria right now, but that appetite changes really quickly because once everyone in town hears a network wants one thing, they all start pitching variations on it. I swear, when I was an animation exec, almost every pitch I heard had Rick and Morty as a comp. It all comes down to timing and execution. And this ultimately is why you should be writing the ideas that excite you, not what you think is going to be the easiest sell. Right from your heart, right from the thing that makes you laugh, the story that you need to tell, not the story that you think, oh, well, maybe this will sell. Because that's not coming from a place of authenticity. And that lack of authenticity shows when you get in the pitch room because you don't have to make it. I want the show that you have to make that's bursting out of you, that's going to get made whether I buy it or not. Those are the kinds of shows that an exec is going to latch on to. So that is our class for today. Let's review. Let's go back over all the points that we hit. This was a rough one, right? We're talking about rejection. We're talking about failure. But these are things that are going to happen to you if you spend any amount of time in this industry. So we talked about dealing with rejection. Dealing with rejection is one of the hardest but most necessary elements of our industry. We dug into ways that you can mitigate against rejection and prepare for it before, during, and after your pitch process. You want to go in managing your expectations, going in understanding that this is a long shot, but the more swings you take at it, the better your odds get. And so recognizing that you are not going to succeed every time. You're not even going to succeed most times. That's the game that we signed up for. While you're waiting to hear back, you ask the question, did you handle everything in your control? If you can say yes to that, congratulations. Feel good about the work that you put in. Leave everything else to everybody else. Don't panic if you haven't heard back. Don't read into too many things. Don't sit there going like, is this a good sign? Is it a bad sign? Who knows? Leave it at that. With that, don't read too much into every interaction or lack thereof. Don't sit there thinking like, ooh, God, I remember when that one exec asked me that one question, their eye looked to the left a little bit. I think that's where we lost them. That's definitely where we lost them. Yep. Then if you get rejected, number one, feel your friggin' feelings. Let yourself process the loss. Grieve it. It sucks. Yeah, it's a necessary part of our industry, but it doesn't make it hurt any less. You put a bunch of work and a bunch of yourself into a project, and they said no thanks. That sucks. Feel that and recognize that whatever you feel after that rejection, it's valid. And let yourself process it, because that's the only way that you come out the other end better for it. Also, learn to identify, was it a failure or a fit issue? Did you take care of everything in your control? Did you sit there and go, all right, well, I fell down on this one aspect, so I can improve that? Or is it just a fit issue? Is it literally just, ooh, okay, their network isn't looking for what I'm selling right now, so I took care of the thing I can control, and I built a better relationship there. Don't blame others. Don't act like everyone's dumber than you. Take accountability for what was in your control. Don't obsess over things you can't control. And then understand that the market doesn't lie. You took something out to the market, and the market said no thanks. Listen to it. Recognize that unfortunately, whether you like it or not, is the truth of what happened. Also, get back on the horse. Have other projects that you're working on. Don't put all of your eggs into one basket. If you get a full slate of passes, a whole bunch of no's, go, all right, cool. On to the next one. Here we go. Also, don't drive yourself crazy over things you can't control or can never know. After rejection, it's easy to sit there and try to figure out everything that didn't work. If I just done this, or if I just done this, if you can't answer definitively, if you haven't gotten that kind of feedback, it's not worth obsessing over. Now, if you did get substantive feedback, congratulations. You got a cheat code. Use that. They literally told you, hey, this is what didn't work for us. Improve that on your next pitch. Did you establish a relationship or further a relationship at the place that you pitched? This, at the very least, should be something that you did. You should have made a positive impression there. Make sure that you build on that. And then, if appropriate, say thank you. Be a human being. Somebody took the time to listen to the thing that you made. That's pretty friggin' cool. All right, so go ahead and send a thank you if it's appropriate. Then we talked about why your pitch isn't selling. There's a whole bunch of reasons. It's not an exhaustive list. We talked about the fact that your comedy might not be funny, your drama might not be dramatic, or your horror might not be scary. You also might not have been pitching the show that you were selling. And so ultimately, they pass because that's not what we were told you were coming in here with, or that's not the premise that you pitched us. You also might not have executed the idea or delivered on the promise of the premise. Maybe you didn't sell it because you didn't activate the exec's imagination. We talked about the things that might be missing that cause that. You might be missing good episode samples, clear examples of what happens in the show. Ask yourself, if this is what happened, is this a problem with the show itself or the way that I pitched it? Might have gotten a pass because they weren't connecting with your characters. Big reason for this, they're not relatable, and you didn't focus enough on the relationships and the personality. We also talked about the fit. This is a big thing. It just might not fit at that network. It might be the network identity, it might be their current mandate, or it might be the execs that they have in place right now. It also might be a budget issue. You might have just pitched something that was too expensive that they can't make. Sorry, that happens. It also might have been because of timing. They might have just greenlit a bunch of shows. They might have just had a big bomb that lost a lot of money. It might just be the end of the year. And lastly, we talked that you might have just been pitching into an oversaturated market. If you pitched a superhero show and everybody wanted to buy a superhero show, they're not going to buy every superhero show. And so ultimately, they might have passed for that reason. So that was our class for today. That was rejection and why you're getting rejected. The last 2 weeks have been rough, right? These two classes have been about some of the hardest things that you have to deal with as a creator. I want you to go back and think about when you get a show that gets passed on, focus on what you can control. That's the biggest takeaway of this, is that is one of the keys to taking your pitch to the next level, is sitting there and going, all right, what was in my control? Did I take care of it? The answer is yes. Walk away proud and happy with the work that you put in. If the answer is no, congratulations. You got a roadmap for a thing to work on. If you have any questions, if you have any comments about this class, go ahead and leave them in the comment section, either on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching this. Again, my name is Carlo Gonzalez-MOSS. I run a company called Moranti Media. You can visit us at moranti.com. If you're looking for pitch coaching, if you need a pitch deck made, our world revolves around the pitch. And if you have any other questions, or you want to reach out to me, or you want to talk more about pitching, you can hit me up on every form of social media. I'm at Carlo Moss. We are at the hour, even a little bit past. So this is where I leave you. But thank you all for joining me. I will see you back here next week, same time, and we'll talk more about pitching. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a good day. Bye.